It's a giant interlaced network of state-sponsored NGOs, directly and tacitly endorsed, who can lie and encourage and incite violence and get away with it. Blatant two-tier system. And this is why Starmer singled out Muslims as a client group of the state. Because he gives them carte blanche to walk around armed. They're allowed to deposit their weapons at the mosque rather than be drawn up on the fact that they're carrying bladed articles, which is a criminal offence in the UK. This is why he gives special carve-outs to them, but not the quote-unquote English community, who aren't even afforded community status and are made to pay for their own gaslighting by Riku and the Home Office. Now, Hope Not Hate are part of this network. They were identified recently by a Swedish military report by the Swedish Defence Research Agency, the FOI, as part of a left-wing militant violence extremist group. Now, the report states, according to Breitbart, that the far left scene often requests information on right-wing opponents that they want to hold to account in some way, for example, visiting people's homes with threats and harassment, and sometimes they want information, names and pictures to publicly identify those involved in nationalist movements. And the organisations like Expo and Hope Not Hate provide this information, outsourcing the violence to Antifa violent thugs. The report specifically lists an operation involving Expo writer, now Hope Not Hate researcher Patrick Hermanusson, who infiltrated the alt-right and far-right circles in the UK and US last year. Bear in mind they also employ Matthew Collins, member of the Communist Party of Great Britain, who stood up in 2013 and said, "Hope Not Hate, brothers and sisters, you are our Red Army," referencing Stalin's Red Army, who raped and murdered their way through civilian towns in Germany during the Second World War. Hope Not Hate has, in addition to receiving funds from George Soros' Open Society Foundations, received funding from the UK government as well. A senior director of the group, Miss Ruth Smith, is a sitting Labour MP for Stoke-on-Trent North. Now let's look at Ruth Smith. Now let's go on a Companies House far-right conspiracy theory website, the UK government. Hope Not Hate Charitable Trust, she was a secretary. She was appointed on the 29th of September 2011 and resigned on the 1st of March 2015. If you go to our Wikipedia page, it lists some very interesting details here, which obviously require confirmation. But Wikipedia, given its left-wing bias, would be curious if they were lying about this. So, Ruth Smith became Director of Public Affairs and Campaigns at the Britain-Israel Communications and Research Centre, BICOM, in November 2005. So it seems there's an intelligence connection there, which is strange. She then stood as an MP candidate in 2010, but was not elected. She was named, and this is a direct quote, she was named as an intelligence source to, quote, strictly protect by the US Embassy in London and a 2009 diplomatic cable published online in 2011. Why have Hope Not Hate got US and UK intelligence assets on their board? Pretty weird, right? She was then subsequently selected from an all-women shortlist, they were desperate to get her in Parliament, to be a Labour Party candidate for Stoke-on-Trent North following the retirement of a incumbent Labour MP, Joan Whalley, and was subsequently elected at the 2015 general election. Now, to correct Breitbart's reporting here, she's not still a sitting Labour MP, she's a Labour baroness instead, because she lost to Jonathan Gullis in the 2019 election in the seat of Stoke-on-Trent North. It was announced, though, on October the 14th, 2022, that as part of the 2022 Special Honours, Smith would receive a life peerage. On the 18th of November 2022, she was created Baroness Anderson of Stoke-on-Trent. She was elected parliamentary chair of the Jewish Labour Movement in April 2019 and is a member of Labour Friends of Israel. Now, let me get this right. Intelligent asset, unpopular MP, was part of the Labour Friends of Israel at the time that anti-Semitism was rife in the Labour Party under Corbyn. And this woman's apparently a credible voice on how to combat anti-Semitism and other forms of hate, according to Hope Not Hate. Very strange, that. Very odd. Let's look at her registered interests as well. She says, I've been a board member of Hope Not Hate Limited since 19th of May 2015, registered the 5th of June 2015. So she was a board member of Hope Not Hate while a sitting Labour MP, after she resigned as secretary. And then we've got her other registered interests here as Baroness of Stoke-on-Trent on the Members of Parliament website. And it says Category 10, non-financial interests, if I just scroll down. Director, Hope Not Hate Limited. And she ceased her interest on the 11th of July 2024. So until very recently, as a Baroness, she was on the director's board for Hope Not Hate. It's still a blatantly partisan charity, whether or not she's on there. And it receives Home Office funding, including under a Conservative government, to dox people like Rorik Nationalist, lie about people like Karl, Nima Parvini, myself, and sitting conservative cabinet ministers, and sick far-left Antifa activists on their political opponents. Despite all of this, despite all the lies, despite encouraging Muslim mobs to go out with the hoax of acid attacks, despite violating the mandate for charities to be politically impartial, they still get invited to Parliament. This is 12th of August 2024 by Labour Member of Parliament for Luton North, known for Islamism of course, Sarah Owen MP. She invited Hope Not Hate to Parliament in the midst of the unrest for the Southport riots. Very strange that. Sure, they have absolutely no connection to the Home Office's efforts to contain public outrage at this time, though it would make sense if they did, because they are attack dogs of the Home Office, because, as the Taxpayers Alliance have unveiled, 6 government departments provided Migrant Help, Stonewall, Refugee Action, Hope Not Hate, and Instalaw with £7,694,408 worth of grants collectively from 2018 to 2021. Hope Not Hate specifically got £50,000 in 2019-2020, and from the Home Office, they got £141,380 in 2019 to 2020 as well. Also in 2019 to 2020, Charlotte Gill has done some fantastic work documenting this. You really should go to subscribe to her Substack and follow her on Twitter. She's found that they got, this is the £141,380 claim. This is despite them proactively campaigning against the Rwanda bill that was being passed in Parliament at the time. So that means sitting cabinet ministers were creating government policy while the body of government they had tasked with carrying out this policy were funding NGOs that were actively working against them. Probably had something to do with that 700-strong Islamic interest lobbying group that was in the Home Office and, who knows, possibly had some bearing on how Raiku were telling the British public to respond to Islamic terror groups. This is interesting as well. She notes that in 2019, Hope Not Hate briefed multiple departments on emerging trends in UK hate and presented a keynote at the Home Office conference on online hate. This was at the time they were vilifying people like J.R.R. Tolkien and Douglas Murray as extremist texts to be monitored under the Raiku and Home Office Prevent programme. Charlotte's done some more work on her Substack here. You can subscribe to her. We're not going to do that now. But she's got a Who Funds You series, and this is where she repeats that Hope Not Hate Charitable Trust, totally disconnected from Hope Not Hate's political wing, received £141,380 from the Home Office in 2020. They also received £20,000 from Facebook UK Limited in 2022, which Nick Clegg obviously helps run, former Deputy Prime Minister, and payments of £240,000 from 2022 to 2023, £275,000 in 2019 to 2020, and £60,000 from 2015 to 2016 from the Paul Hamlyn Foundation. That totals £585,000. If you don't know who the Paul Hamlyn Foundation are, this is the group that Liz Truss, in our interview, mentioned as being headed by a former Ed Miliband campaign advisor. Again, just connections with intelligence agencies, sitting politicians, the Home Office and the like. They gave Hope Not Hate all that money as part of its migration fund to, quote, create a UK network of young migrant leaders and a network of leaders and organisations within towns who will respond to local needs and pressure points and share learning to enable rapid response to provocative elements, aka AstroTurf activists, to come out in the street, to hold placards, to counter-signal the far right, to then create photographs that the UK media could easily run to present as a united front against fascism occurring in Britain. Curious that. Why would the Home Office want to fund that? Very odd. Essentially a roving band of leftists, with its raison d'etre being open borders. There we go. It wrote also about its raison d'etre being open borders on its since removed migration page on its website. It read, "We envision a world in which everyone is free to move and no one is forced to move." You can go and find that on the archive, but it's since been taken down because of public scrutiny. Public scrutiny levied by the likes of Charlotte Gill. Very good work. She found that between 2020 and 2023, the Paul Hamlyn Foundation was given $1.36 million in government grants, and it awarded as well the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants $225,000 in 2023, $60,000 in 2022, and $210,000 in 2019, and $60,000 in 2016. Now, I bring this up It was also covered in the Telegraph by, again, Stephen Edgington, who's still working there. Because that group too, the Paul Hamlin Foundation, Hope Not Hate, and the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants are actively lobbying the Home Office and the Migration Advisory Committee on how many migrants to let in, as well as how public perception is shaped around migrants. They're not only increasing migration, they're gaslighting the British public's response to migration. And they're influencing lawmakers and no matter which government it is, in order to make more permissive migration policies. So this is Moira Sinclair, the Paul Hamlin Foundation's chief executive, also the current chairman of Sadiq Khan's Cultural Leadership Board. Letitia Ishibashi, the Paul Hamlin Foundation's head of migration, worked with Sadiq Khan and the Greater London Authority to provide greater services for London's migrant communities. So, again, central governments of the capital city are providing benefits to new arrivals above and beyond the native population, and we wonder why Sadiq Khan keeps getting elected. The Paul Hamlin Foundation believes the current immigration system has, quote, its roots in colonial enterprise and racially hierarchical worldviews, and, quote, is increasingly militarized, systemically racist, and discriminatory against women and other groups, and shaped by populist narratives. You could accuse Islam of all of that, but of course they won't. It has accused Number 10 of, quote, stoking far-right anti-migrant activity, if only through its new illegal migration bill, which is aimed at stopping small boats from crossing the Channel. Through its funding, it aims to create a, quote, wider social justice movement that can overhaul the UK border policy and, quote, influence policy or legislation. This includes providing financial support for the academic work of a member of the government's Migration Advisory Committee, which was set up by New Labour, under Tony Blair, of course it was, to provide the Home Office with, quote, transparent, independent, and evidence-based advice. Basically, it's a quango which gives partisan guidance in favour of whatever the predominant lobbying bodies within the institutions happen to be at the time, which, as we can see in the Home Office, is a 700-strong faction of people agitating for Islamic interests. A Home Office document seen by the Telegraph showed the influence that the Migration Advisory Committee has on policymakers' decision-making, with officials saying they would, quote, be guided by the Migration Advisory Committee on any required changes to the immigration system that sought to bring overall numbers down. On the Migration Advisory Committee is a woman named Madeleine Sumption, who is the director of the University of Oxford's Migration Observatory and has been a member of the MAC since 2016. Compass, her academic outfit, was the beneficiary of a 10-year funding grant from the Paul Hamlin Foundation and will have received at least $2 million by 2028. I wonder if that's going to shape the perceptions of the Migration Advisory Committee. So the Home Office funds the Paul Hamlin Foundation. The Paul Hamlin Foundation fund the Joint Council, the Migration Advisory Committee members' academic outfit, Compass, and Hope Not Hate. They set the policy that government ministers are meant to act upon. Government ministers are pressured to keep increasing migration, and it goes right back around to entrusting the Home Office to carry that out. It's a circular funding system. It's a woke Ouroboros. The snake is devouring its own tail, and in doing so is destroying the entire country. Miss Sumption supports other projects funded by the Paul Hamlin Foundation, including Reunite Families UK, where she serves as an advisory board member. Reunite Families UK campaigns for easier routes for family members of migrants, so chain migration, and has said migrants are, quote, being used as a pawn in a war of increasingly hostile and outright racist policies by the government. Earlier this year, and this was 2023, Sumption spoke at a meeting organised by Migrant Voice, which received another £200,000 from the Paul Hamlin Foundation. Now, Madeleine Sumption, going to her Wikipedia page, very trustworthy face, she's an MBE, she's a political scientist. If you notice the surname, sounding familiar, she's the daughter of Lord Jonathan Sumption, who is a Conservative Lord, one of the first employees for the Centre for Policy Studies, co-founded by Margaret Thatcher, a staunch EU Remainer, but also a critic of lockdown policies. So these people, Sumption here, are beneficiaries of large sums of money. They're Nepo babies. And they are actively tearing asunder the countries that have given them all this wealth and privilege. And she probably gets cabs everywhere and lives in a nice leafy part of Oxfordshire and doesn't have to deal with the increase 50% or 10% for sexual assaults, specifically fold, that regular women on public transport are facing by all of the new arrivals who have less than savoury views on the safety of women. The Joint Council Welfare of Immigrants that we mentioned before, Charlotte Gills also dug into this because at the Channel 4 immigration debate at the last election, where Richard Tice basically trounced everyone, well done, there was an immigration lawyer immigration solicitor, who said, "I could dismantle all of your immigration policies." It turns out that she is from the Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants. They have multiple social media posts campaigning against the Conservative Party. Quote, "The only consistent thing about Suella Braverman is her cruelty, and for Labour," quote, "what must Labour do on migration?" They frustrated the Rwanda deportation scheme, gloating, quote, in all caps, "Success. All of our clients who are facing removal to Rwanda have been released thanks to the tremendous work of our legal team." So the Home Office is funding a pro-illegal migrant legal advocacy group who are advising more migrants be shipped into the country. At the same time, funding PR efforts to gaslight the British public when one of their migrants decides to attack girls at an Ariana Grande pop concert, or possibly in Southport at a Taylor Swift dance class. Pretty frustrating. Last bit on this, Charity Commission, another quango set up by Tony Blair Institute. As you can see, Paul Hamlin Foundation retains their charitable status despite doing all this activist work, as does Hope Not Hate. Now, Hope Not Hate have a charitable trust. Hope Not Hate itself, Hope Not Hate Limited, is completely disconnected from this. You could never suggest that money is being passed from one to the other. But don't worry. Accusations of political bias doesn't matter anyway, because they won't enforce them, because the Charity Commission have multiple blogs on whether or not you can be a political charity. And it said, what do charities need to do to consider ahead of a general election? It says, charities are required to be independent and cannot have political purposes, and this is important for public trust in charities. As such, charities must never stray into party politics. They must never promote or be seen to promote a political party or candidate, unless you have a sitting MP, now Labour Baroness, on your board. Unless you're invited to Parliament by Labour MPs. Unless you send all of your briefings to the likes of Jess Phillips to discourage Liz Truss from coming onto this podcast, this show specifically, not the podcast, the Lotus Eaters, and try to get her deselected by the Conservative Party with the letter writing campaign. They're obviously an attack dog of the Home Office, the intelligence services, the Uniparty, and particularly the Labour Party, while being funded by the Conservative government. Hope Not Hate are an extension arm of Raiku, which is a psychological warfare operation waged against the British public who happen to notice that the new arrivals might want to kill their children. But don't worry, none of this even applies, because Orlando Fraser, KC, has written a blog post this year, 14th of March 2024, ahead of the general election, saying, yes, political think tanks deserve their charitable status. Quote, some argue that think tanks are inherently political organisations and accordingly don't deserve the benefits that charitable status brings. I disagree. Charitable think tanks make an enormously positive contribution to intellectual debate. That's a good thing, whatever the intellectual tradition they come from. Like any charity, think tanks are free to engage in political activity where doing so supports their charitable purposes. Despite this, some have sought to co-opt the Charity Commission into campaigns against think tanks with which they disagree. I want to be clear that, as long as a think tank is not endorsing political parties or undertaking inappropriate political activity, the Commission as regulator has no interest in stifling their work and thus will rarely intervene when allegations of political bias are made. This is a key part of fair, balanced and independent approach to the Commission. Bullshit! Bullshit! All of these things are just outfits for intelligence agencies seeking to weaponize the press, the Home Office, immigration law, asylum applications against the interests of the native British people. And so, anytime you see a coordinated media campaign in the aftermath of a disaster, the government, the narrative looks pretty bad for them, know this is where it's coming from. It's Raiku, it's the Home Office, it's the Charity Commission, it's their network of activists and NGOs, and you have paid for all of it. You have paid for your own cultural and demographic erasure. You have paid to be told not to look back in anger when your children are raped and stabbed and killed. And I tell you what, any serious political outfit looking to be an insurgent force in British politics needs to know this exists and make it a mandate on day one to abolish the whole lot. You need a Javier Milei strategy to this. You need to be a fuera with these government departments, and you need to launch lengthy investigations, not impartial investigations, because that just means you're going to appoint a civil servant who secretly votes Labour as the arbiter of all of this, and they're going to prefabricate the outcome to be in favour of the government narrative. You need proper investigations, publicly transparent investigations, to find out who has waged psychological warfare on the British public and who should spend a very long time in prison. You should not be locking up people for getting social media posts wrong about the identity of the Southport attacker when it was posted on a fake news website by a Pakistani national. You should be locking up people, of course, that incite riots, including for Extinction Rebellion and the Muslim mobs, including Nick Lowell's. But what you shouldn't be doing is freeing violent criminals. You should be deporting all of the criminal foreign nationals in this country back home to make space for these people. Chalk, Campbell, all of these people that were involved in telling the grieving parents of the Manchester Arena bombing and all other disasters, don't look back in anger. These are accomplices to atrocities. And they're doing it with our money. I think it's high time that a political party promises to have a more transparent state and ensure that the people that did this are held to account.